Hey everybody, Chaz here. In this video I'm going to be looking at the iPhone 6s and seeing just how good is it in mid-2020. So I did a review about the iPhone 6s earlier this year, but considering iOS 14 is going to come out soon, I'm going to be taking another look at the iPhone 6s in mid-2020. The iPhone 6s was released in 2015 and it is almost 5 years old, which honestly is incredible considering how well the iPhone 6s holds up right now despite its age, and it is also expected to receive iOS 14 when it is released, as it is still a very capable smartphone even on iOS 13. But the question is, how well does it hold up in mid-2020? First of all, we have performance, and I'll say this now, the iPhone 6s still performs outstandingly well. Despite it being almost 5 years old, it still works very well when it comes to multitasking, browsing the internet and playing games, and apps still launch quickly, and lag is actually rare, despite the iPhone 6s's age. Despite only having 2 GB of RAM, it actually performs much better than Android phones from around the same time with this amount of RAM, and sometimes even higher, maybe 3 GB, because iOS is very good when it comes to memory management and optimization. This means that even the latest iOS versions can still run very well on older iPhones. Next up, we have battery life, and honestly, if you like having more than 3 or 4 hours screen on time, I honestly would advise against the iPhone 6s, as the battery quality is no longer up to 2020's standards, considering many of the latest phones have bigger batteries and better battery life, particularly Samsung phones, which are currently known to be very good when it comes to battery life in 2020, and also the battery life on the 6s has generally gotten worse over time in iOS updates. My battery life is quite bad, to be fair, on my 6s, and I tend to only get around 3 hours of screen on time, but that could also be because my 6s is a few years old and could have degraded over time when it comes to battery life, as batteries do degrade over time, and batteries on older iPhones tend to not be very large. But if you don't mind having to carry a charger around with you or using a battery case, then this shouldn't be much of an issue. But if you intend on using your phone for hours on end without access to a charger or any way to charge your iPhone, I honestly would advise against the iPhone 6s, as you are going to run into issues there. Thirdly, let's take a look at the software updates, and this is kind of important, especially if buying on a contract, because you want your phone to last at least 2 years, possibly even longer. And if you're considering buying the iPhone 6s on a contract, I'd honestly recommend you reconsider this, because although the iPhone 6s is currently receiving software updates, I cannot say whether it will still be receiving software updates in 2 years' time, because iOS 14 is expected to be announced soon, and it's expected to be the last major iOS upgrade for the iPhone 6s, and it's possible iOS 15 could completely end support for it, which of course is an issue if you want your phone to last you a long time. Of course, if you just need a phone to tide you over for a little while until you can afford a better model, then this hopefully shouldn't be much of a problem. But if you want your phone to last you for longer, then I honestly would recommend you go look at the iPhone 7 or 8, or even the 2020 iPhone SE, as these phones are also dropping in value and price, and you'll be able to get them for a lower price, and they also are guaranteed to get updates for longer. Fourthly, let's look at design. So the design of the iPhone 6s is still solid despite feeling a little cheap by 2020 standards, as it is made of aluminium, while newer iPhones are made of glass. So honestly, while the design still feels outdated, it does feel quite solid, but it does feel quite cheap compared to how modern iPhones feel more modern. But also the iPhone 6s still has the headphone jack, so you can still plug in your old headphones into it without using a dongle or an adapter or anything, which also is a good feature of the 6s. If you do have some old headphones, you want to use them, then if the 6S sounds good, you should definitely consider the iPhone 6S. And in general, the iPhone 6S is a phone with a solid design and it still feels good. Even if it does feel a little cheap by 2020 standards, it does still have a good design. Finally, I'm going to be looking at prices for the iPhone 6S. You can now get the iPhone 6S off Amazon renewed for less than £160 in the UK. Of course, there are many other people from other countries watching this, and it would take me a long time to read out how much the 6S costs on Amazon in every single country in the world. So I do suggest you search it up if you do not live in the UK, and there you can find out whether you can get it on offer or anything. If you do want to get the iPhone 6S on a carrier, which I do not recommend at this point, especially if you want a phone that will last you when it comes to software updates, but if you do want to get the iPhone 6S on a carrier for some reason, then you should look at your carrier for a good deal. And I believe you can still get some quite good deals on the iPhone 6S at the moment, so I definitely suggest you look into that. Although once again, due to software updates potentially not being around for the 6S in 2 years' time, I wouldn't necessarily recommend you buy it on a carrier, but the option is still there if you want it. To conclude, the iPhone 6S still remains a good phone in 2020 when it comes to performance, and it has a solid design despite feeling a little cheap to 2020 standards. But if you are buying for long-term support, I honestly would advise against it, especially if you're looking into a contract, as I cannot say that the iPhone 6S will still be getting updates in 2 years' time, and I actually doubt it will. And also, if you're buying for battery life, I wouldn't recommend the iPhone 6S either, as it does not live well to today's standards when it comes to battery life, and the screen on time for battery life is also quite bad. Of course, I would recommend you fork out the extra money for the 7 or even 2020 iPhone SE if you can afford that, or if it's within your budget. But if you can't and just want a phone to tide you over, the iPhone 6S remains a very good phone, even in 2020. But otherwise, I honestly wouldn't recommend it if you're into long-term support or good battery life. Then I honestly would recommend you look at slightly newer iPhone models or even Android phones. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to be notified each time I upload. Anyways, have a good day. See you next time, and goodbye.